be a little bit,
Yeah.
you
There
know,
was just one case where I felt like how, and I actually saved a screenshot, like to send you later, but I felt like I completely, like the direction I went in, or my assessment or understanding of that case and structure was wildly different from what was like written as a solution. And I actually am going to send it to you later and see like what you think. So did I like completely misinterpret something, or the answers are misinterpreting what the case is asking for? So that was just one specific instance.
yeah,
Apart from that, the rest, they're going on.
good, good. Well, yeah, no, do send it to me because, sometimes, I, you know, I think every now and then you're going to have a case practice that
Mm-hmm.
you kind of feel like you've taken two steps backwards, but the
Mm-hmm.
idea is to sort of do the post-mortem analysis, right? Okay, how was I thinking about
Yeah.
this? How should I have been thinking about it? Is there anything that what I know now I
Mm-hmm.
would do differently? I mean, that's, I think, a very good learning process. So,
Mm-hmm. Yeah. I am getting stressed out when the clock starts ticking. Like my first cases were taking me like 5 minutes because I kept trying to, since you have the option of, oh, I can change it, I'm trying to pull in the time. But yeah, it's a learning process.
that's right. That's right. And I think as long as you're intentionally kind of watching the clock and then working to be a little bit faster with each,
Mm-hmm.
you know, every couple of days, you kind of get a little bit faster. And at some point, you just have to realize that this is not about accuracy. It's not a
Right.
precise, it's about intake and quick identification and, in some
Mm-hmm.
ways, like grounded instincts, like not completely just instinct, but good grounding in your instincts.
Mm-hmm.
And that's what repetition, that's the benefit of repetition.
Yep.
Cool. Okay, so I have a lovely case for us to work on to see kind of how you're thinking about this. Um, I'm going to give you, like we did before, I'll give you a little bit of the background, let you kind of take over from there. This is a pretty high level case. It can go in
Mm-hmm.
a lot of directions. I do have one
Mm-hmm.
analytic component that I want you to work
Mm-hmm.
on, and I'll probably prompt you because it might not be something you just naturally delve into.
Okay.
So,
Yeah.
take that into consideration. And if I sort of like halt you to do that, don't be alarmed by that.
Okay.
Okay.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, so let me give you this background. So you are part of a consulting team that is working with an organization called Divine Dresses. As the name probably reveals, this is a company that is in the apparel and clothing industry. And
Mm-hmm.
just to give a little bit of context, this organization started about 30 years ago and did a really nice job of establishing themselves as a specialty catalog based dress seller. Over time, as we know, the mail order business has really transformed. It's migrated quite significantly to be more of an e commerce based business, although Divine Dresses still has a catalog business. They are a company that operates only in the United States. They generate about $100 million a year in sales. Their gross margin runs about 38%, and their operating profit runs about 12%. Your team has been brought in by the chief marketing officer, and this individual is fairly new to the organization. They were brought in with kind of an agenda by the senior executives, the CEO and the board, to drive some aggressive growth for this company. And the chief marketing officer thinks that this growth ought to come from expanding the product portfolio. The sort of mission that you have is to think about this business and consider what are some of the key criteria that should be used to pursue new businesses. And then how would you advise the chief marketing officer on expanding the product portfolio as an engine for growth?
Sorry, you got cut off just a bit. The last sentence.
So the first is kind of what are some of the key considerations to think about pursuing new businesses for growth? And then how would that relate to the chief marketing officer's question about expanding the product portfolio?
Okay,
Okay.
got it. I think I managed to get most of that. I will quickly give you my understanding of the information so that just to make sure I didn't miss anything.
Perfect.
Divine Dresses is about a 30-year-old specialty catalog-based dresser, seller of dresses, based out of US, and their main business is the mail order dress business. Overall, there's been a trend of moving away from mail order to e-commerce. They still do have this catalog-based business of theirs. They have about $100 million in sales yearly, gross margin 38%, operating profit 12%. And now they have a new chief marketing officer who would like to drive, who's been brought in to drive a good aggressive growth strategy. And we come in to help and consult with the CMO to how to expand their product portfolio. Number one is the criteria that should be looked at to pursue new businesses, and how would these new businesses that we pursue would eventually relate to expanding their product portfolio altogether.
Right.
Is that okay?
Yep. Yep. That's a good summary.
Okay, good. Before we start diving into what their numbers are and where they're looking to go, just wanted to ask a few questions and make sure I have a clearer picture. So the company is still only doing catalog-based sales, or do they have any e-commerce presence at all?
They do have an e-commerce business. So right now the revenue is about a 50-50 split. So the catalog comes out, and then customers can either order via the website or through an 800 number. And then on the website, there's actually been a very good effort to align the look and feel of the website and the catalog, so it's a bit seamless.
Okay. All right. So they do have an e-commerce presence, and are there? I'd like to understand a little bit on how what their products currently are. So, are they currently? You mentioned they originally started as a dress seller. Are they still only doing dresses, or have they already? They have a small diversification already.
Yeah, that's a good question. It is predominantly dresses. So what they've done is they've broken it down into categories of dresses. So one category is kind of casual dresses, something that you might wear, to a Sunday barbecue or, a nice dinner. They have a line of dresses that is for business wear, so a little bit more conservative, to be worn in the professional environment. They have a party line wear that would be, going to events and activities. And then they have a formal, a black tie, high end type of affair. So they've built out those categories of dresses. That's really what they sell. That's probably 90% of the current portfolio.
Okay. So may I assume for the purpose of this case that the products currently are four categories of dresses?
Yes.
Okay. Okay. Great. So I asked questions about revenue, about product, and now is it okay if I take a minute or two to gather my thoughts and come up with a structure to how to
Yes.
approach this?
Yes, please.
Pardon the noise while I scribble. Okay, getting there. Needs. Okay, so I jotted a couple of ideas down. Basically, as we established the purpose, the client would like to drive their growth and expand their portfolio. And in order to advise them on which direction they should be going, of course, we have to look at a couple of things. Number one would be look at in general, we have already established that there's been a shift from mail order to e-commerce based shopping for dresses now, but that's not the goal there on how to beef up their e-commerce. The main goal here is to understand what market or what other products they should be looking at to expand their growth. So we should look at the market, the apparel market today, and try to understand the trends of the last few years, whether um, the trends for women's dresses have changed away from dresses only to and have gone in which direction. That would be one. Then, which basically ties into what the consumer is really looking for. And dresses going away to more athletic wear, for example. Like we know that companies like Athleta and Lululemon, they have really showcased the athletic wear as leisure wear or casual wear. So those seem to be avenues or similar kind of avenues that we should be exploring more directions. So that would be a market analysis kind of idea. Or in general, also looking at new products, we should look at, again, along with dresses, can the company look at going into accessories to go with the dresses, especially for the formal high-end and party lines where with dresses, if they started offering matching purses or matching jewelry along those lines. Shoes and purses would be another area to be exploring, which would diversify from dresses to, and also help to coordinate more like going away just from dresses to overall outfits and looks. and of course, the non-dress kind of strategy. And finally, since this is dresses, I'm assuming this website is basically the larger number of clientele is women. So the company can also consider expanding towards men's outfits and similar categorizing of casual business, party, high-end kind of areas. And that is essentially, because right now it looks like they're not reaching out to 50% of the demographic. So those are some of the areas we should be looking at. And additionally, once we start looking at it, then of course there will be we should look at this company's revenue, what kind of split they have between their operating expenses, if they can, is it even feasible to keep their, because once they grow into new products, they should be thinking about the company's operations and seeing if they are able to support both the mail order and the e-commerce business while having a bigger, larger, diverse portfolio.
Got it. So, I'm interested in, I like some of these ideas that you're presenting. What I want to have you maybe talk through is, let's just say we have this laundry list of ideas. Let's say that we did a brainstorming session with the client. How would you go about kind of broadly evaluating and prioritizing those ideas? Like what would be the criteria, the set of criteria that you might use that would guide Divine Dresses to kind of narrow that list or even focus on the one or two ideas that they should pursue?
Okay. I think because this is, anytime there is if you're thinking of how to expand the portfolio, there are two components. One is, I mean, it's a company. The goal is obviously to make profit, but there's also, you want to go in the direction where you want your customers, like essentially the growth should be in the direction that the customer needs or consumers want. So if I had to condense down before figuring out which direction they go to, accessories and shoes and accessories, non-dresses, men's items, or I forgot to mention earlier, children's clothes. We need to do market study or trend study of each of those categories to see which is the fastest growing market segment of all of them. So the four items where I would look at would be women's accessories, menswear, and non-dress outfits, which still keeps the core clientele of the female clientele, but also just expands the portfolio in that direction. Non-dress based outfits and children's clothes. So those four, we need to study market trends of each of them, where there has been growth, and look at, for example, is maybe we'd look and find something like, is menswear something that men actually buy on the internet, or is it still more of a brick and mortar kind of shopping? So we need to understand, get those insights to see what would be successful to still have introduced in a mail order or e-commerce format.
Is that the only criteria that you would look at, or are there others?
Okay, I see. Okay, so number one, as I said, market trends to figure out which direction to go. Number two would be, out of these, which is, again, trends of which is historically or financially most profitable to go in. That would be two. Number three would be, if they plan to keep their mail order business, then out of these four broad categories, which is continuing to have a presence in mail order and makes sense to keep in the mail order way of selling things. So I would look at those three, and as those three would help me figure out, or help us to figure out what does the customer finally want, and then understand what would be the expenses, the operations portion, the cost of operating, cost of producing this, and where the break-even points for each of those would be. If there's a market, if one of them, for example, if I take accessories and it looks like it takes longer to break even in accessories compared to men's clothes, then it will probably be makes more sense to choose men's clothes over going into accessories, which require setting up separate infrastructure and go from there.
Got it. Okay, so you are touching on an area that I want to probe a little bit analytically. So I'm going to give you some data and some information, and then I'm going to let you evaluate this and tell me what it means. So one of the areas that I think you've talked about is adding accessories to the portfolio. That is also something that Divine Dresses had considered. And so one of the things they want to do as a sort of discussion activity is to figure out, if they were to do this, would they manufacture themselves, or would they actually use an outside supplier to produce the accessories inventory? And so I want to give you some information, have you look at it, tell me which you think makes more sense, and then what might be some of the key considerations for making a choice. Okay. So let's presume that Divine Dresses forecast that they could sell 20,000 units of accessories, just units. Whether it's shoes or purses or earrings, doesn't matter. We'll just call it units. They have identified that if they were to manufacture this themselves, they would have the following costs. So direct materials would be $4.80 per unit. Direct labor would be $7 per unit. There would be a variable manufacturing overhead of $3.20 per unit. And there would be an additional $10 per unit of fixed manufacturing overhead. If they instead used an outside supplier, that outside supplier would manufacture for an average of $23.50 a unit. In addition,
there is $23.50.
Yep.
Okay.
If Divine Dresses were to go down that path, they have some facilities that they could also rent out that would generate $150,000 per year for them. And then in addition, if they were to manufacture through some outside supplier, they would still, of that $10 per unit of fixed overhead, they would actually still incur $6 of that.
I'm sorry, just trying to understand the last part. You said that they have, if they went with outside manufacturing, then they have some facilities that could be used in some fashion to generate $150,000 revenue per year. And then, okay, and then that would bring down the fixed manufacturing cost overhead to $6 from 10. Is that what is that how I would interpret that?
Yes. So they would essentially be able to eliminate $4, but they would keep $6.
Got it. Okay. Any other numbers? I'm sorry, maybe I got you off.
Nope, you're okay. That is all the
Okay.
numbers that I have.
Okay. So I want to make sure I heard the numbers correctly. So the company, Divine Dresses, thinks they can manufacture 20,000 units of accessories per year,
Hmm.
or they can sell 20. Okay, it's yearly. Got
It's
it.
yearly.
So
Yep.
we have two scenarios, and the action is to figure out if it's more profitable to do it self-made or go with outsider manufacturing. The costs I got were for self-made, the direct material cost $4.8 per unit, labor $7 per unit, variable cost is $3.2 per unit, and fixed manufacturing cost is $10 per unit, which does come down to $6 if they rent out their existing facilities to offset some of that. And if they go with an outsider manufacturing, then it's a fixed cost of $23.5 per unit. I just want to make sure if I got all the numbers correctly.
You do have all the numbers correct.
Okay, so uh, we can start with the easier calculation for the, if you go with outsider, then 20,000 accessories, if one unit costs 23.5. Also, I can assume that all the accessories cost the same, correct?
Yes.
Okay, very good. So 20,000 times 23.5 will give me, what I'm going to do is I'm going to try to calculate the total cost of, actually, I realized something else. I have the cost of one unit to manufacture, which is $23.5. I'm going to try to come up with the cost of manufacturing each of the items on a self basis. So let me start from there. So I'm going to add up all the numbers you gave, and then I'll present from there. So, okay, so we know that if they went with an outsider manufacturing, then the per unit is $23.5. If they go with the self, then either their cost, if we take the $10 unit of fixed cost, then the cost of their good to produce is $25. But if they do rent their facility out and are successful in doing so, then the cost of what it costs for them to make their goods is $21. So if I compare these three, then probably the most economically feasible direction for them to go would be to manufacture their own goods with the contingents that they are able to rent out the facility so that they can get the extra revenue that brings their fixed cost down from 10 to $6.
Okay. So financially, that's how the number
Financially, strictly
lie out.
financially, yes, yes.
What else might you think about when making a manufacturing decision, whether to do it internally or externally?
Okay. Oh, sorry, my computer just went to sleep. Okay. The choice of. Okay, so as we mentioned, financially, it seems like numbers don't lie. It makes sense to go down the self-cost with renting out facility path. But if we look at it from not just financially, but more from a strategic point of view, going self-cost versus outsider, then there are a couple of other items that we do need to consider. And off the top of my head, I think I do want to ask one clarifying question. Their dresses that they sell, their primary revenue making item dresses, do they design and manufacture them in house or is that outsourced?
Depends on the category. So
I see.
the higher end dresses, they do design and manufacture. The lower end dresses, they contract manufacture. They design them, but they have somebody else manufacture them.
So higher end, they do themselves in-house, and the lower end, they contract, or the casual outfits is outsourced. Okay. So if we can start thinking along those lines very soon to see if they can be split. However, fundamentally, if you are doing something in-house, I would think they can have more control over what they're manufacturing. So, and they can integrate the style of their accessories better with the dressers. It's less logistics, and they retain more control over what accessories go with what dresses. If they go with outside, the con for that is if they go with outside, they lose that control. On the other hand, they don't have experience in accessories. It's a new market. So anytime you're entering a new portfolio, then they need to get the expertise, or they don't have that in-house expertise to design accessories. So it might make sense to hire a small company, or sorry, acquire a small company to help with designing accessories that would seamlessly go and style well with their outfits. And since they don't have that accessory experience in house, in that case, it makes sense to hire outside experts. Those are like two very broad pros and cons that come for each of those two scenarios.
Mm-hmm.
Not to mention, that would be like a fundamental strategy. But then if you go towards operating, or logistics rather, then you have to figure out if you can open an entire new facility or infrastructure to manufacture accessories, or can they leverage some of their existing dress design or making facilities to tap into their existing resources and use that. Um, Outside manufacturing, we have to think about um, the time and the cost of manufacturing and shipping logistics, and if that will delay the outfit. It has to integrate seamlessly with the dress selling thing, because someone is buying a dress, they want to ensure that the accessories or supply chain is robust, and what accessories are actually in hand when someone orders the dress, it gets shipped. If the accessories don't ship with it, then it's not much point. So those are some of the ideas or pros and cons that I would look at when deciding self cost versus outside. The
Mm-hmm.
last thing, actually, I just realized one other thing. The facility that they are counting that they could possibly rent out to make some of their money that will help towards the revenue or the cost, we have to see if there are any constraints to renting that out and how easily that could be done.
Good.
Because that actually gives them a $2.5 $3 advantage, and if they're counting on that, but they're not able to rent it out, so they should definitely explore that upfront before going down the path of uh, manufacturing in-house. And the last idea I had was, you mentioned that the dresses that they have, the higher ends they design and make in-house, but the lower ends are outsourced. So further, if we do decide to go down the path of manufacturing in-house, then specifically the accessories for the higher end could manufacture in-house to have a more seamless integration of the dresses with the accessories, while the lower ones, which are more casual, outside contractors, those could be outsourced.
Good. Okay, cool. So we're going to have a short meeting with our client and brief them on some of the work and the thinking and the analysis. Can you give me a walkthrough of what you would want to share with the executive team of Divine Dresses at this point?
Sure. So we understand that the team at Divine Dresses wants to aggressively broaden their product portfolio and understand what are the criteria would be to successfully do that and relate to their goal of actually having a larger portfolio. The goal here is not to transition, have more business, and go from mail order to e-commerce. So we would first look at what kind of market trends are there to understand customer needs. 4 key areas to look at would be accessories to go with their mass dresses, menswear, non-dress kind of outfits, for example, athletic wear, trend wear, resort wear kind of outfits, and children's dresses. If they would like to, one of the areas where some research has been done would be accessories to go with the dresses. There are two ways. The numbers suggest that while there are two ways to uh, get into the accessories business to complement the dresses, one is creating in-house self-making, and the other would be outsider. The self-making with renting out facility to generate revenue is the most cost profitable way to go. However, there are pros and cons of making in-house to going outside, such as expertise, outsourcing, losing control, and they fall in different buckets. We need to explore all of those in more details to understand what is the most feasible path to go. But economically, self-making with facility rent out would be the most financially sound option.
Mm-hmm. Okay. Great. Okay, let's discuss. What do you think?
Are we done? Can I breathe?
Yes. I have to remember to give you a signal. Okay, Chandrani, now is the part where you breathe.
uh,
I have to
my
like
notes are
we're gonna have to do this on video sometime because literally, if you're not breathing, I want to see the look on your face.
no, no, I'm breathing. I was joking. You have to understand, I'm literally tucked away in the back corner at lunch hour. I sincerely hope nobody walks into this conference room. And I'm trying to keep my voice down because the walls are very thin. And obviously, nobody here knows that I'm applying for a new job.
No, of
So
course, of course.
it's almost like stress test. So,
Yes,
no, I'm
yes.
breathing. Uh, Hopefully, I didn't sound too stressed. So,
Uh-uh.
I
No,
think
not at all.
I I was trying to remember some of the feedback you had given last time, especially like ask more questions up front and try to ask more, think more breadth than depth. And I hope I was able to incorporate some of those ideas, into this case compared to last time. The other thing is I realize as I speak, I think and then I come up with new ideas. So I don't know if that's a problem because all the stuff that I've read, it's like, okay, write everything down and then go from there. For example, I wrote down, okay, accessories, shoes, non-dresses, men's, and then I'm like, why not children's dresses? So that came later, and I kind of thought I should add it on later. So I'm not sure if that's the right strategy. But if you're not written it in the first go, then don't even go down that path. So I need to understand if that's good. The I'm sure you'll tell me, unless I royally messed up the math, this was reasonably straightforward. But the main thing here was it's not like they're trying to increase their revenue or they're trying to go, catalog to e-commerce or something like that, but mainly they seem to be reasonably happy with the mix of the way they are selling things. But here it was more like what else we can sell. So I
Yeah.
kind of tried to direct my thoughts towards that direction instead of going down the let's build a cooler website or let's have an app or something. So
Yeah,
those
I
are some
think
of
you got
my
right. You got that piece. I mean, there is some growth, right? They want to grow. They want to sell more, but
mm-hmm.
the question is how and would
Mm.
expanding the portfolio make sense,
Yeah. Okay.
right? Which is sort of what you know
Mm.
you stayed within the question, which is good.
Okay.
Um, I'm just writing down a couple of notes so I can
Please.
organize my thoughts. Um, okay, so I think, yeah, I wrote down in a couple of places, like I feel a sense of progress, right? Like I can tell that you know, you're taking some of the techniques we're talking about and from your practice and you're, applying them. I
Mm-hmm.
think the bare bones of what this case is trying to do, you got through the bare bones, right? The places where I'm going to give you some comments and suggestions, it's
Mm-hmm.
about like just adding more sizzle, right? A little more like woo. I mean, it's kind of
Mm-hmm.
one of those things where the interviewer wants to hear something and go, "Oh, wow, that's interesting." Like I want a couple more of those wow points.
Okay.
Um,
If I may ask, in this particular case, if you had to, what would you do? Add some sizzle.
so the the case is frankly quite simple. It's how
Mm-hmm.
you treat the simplicity, right?
Mm-hmm.
So it really starts with how do you define your understanding of the present business? And then
Mm-hmm.
how do you build a set of criteria to evaluate what the future business should be? And are you thinking about, like, when we get to this idea of accessories, are you linking it back to kind of the present of the business? So,
Okay.
you know, so as an example, so up front, you ask some good questions. How's the company selling? What's their product portfolio? I think one more question might have helped you a lot.
Mm-hmm.
Like, what
Okay.
what makes this company special? Right? They're in the dress
Good point.
business.
Good point.
Okay? Because with that piece of information, Chandrani, you can really learn a lot. So if I tell you,
All
gosh,
right.
this company is really special because they serve the needs of women in this really special way, right? Okay, I pick up on the dress piece, right? That eliminates a whole lot of stuff. Like, you're not going to start a men's line if this company is all about women, right? Now, if I said, oh, this company is really amazing at adapting with the trends while still keeping things classic. I don't know much about fashion, but like, then you still have an opening for some of these other pieces,
I see.
right? So one more question gives you kind of this wealth of understanding, and it helps
Okay.
you as you go along, because that becomes like the lighthouse, right? The company's positioning, their strategy, their differentiation, that's a big deal. So if I'm thinking about any other, addition to the portfolio, any other way of selling, any other way of manufacturing, like, it's all got to link back to our current
I
strategy
see.
and differentiation. Okay.
I see. I see. I
Right.
think I get it.
Yep. So I think
I
you're
get it.
you're
But
there. I think
okay.
you asked more questions this time up front that gave you more information. It's now just that one additional question.
Okay. But to be
Okay.
very honest, I think like the reason like that's the thing with these, right? There is almost no right or wrong answer. The reason
Correct.
I actually asked about, for example, it didn't even occur to me like, okay, their core clientele is women, so let's make more women stuff. The way I thought was core clientele is women. But let's face it, if there are women buying, you know, certain category of women who are buying dresses, statistics show that a lot of those shoppers often buy men's outfits also for their partner. So they're spending all this time on their catalog or website, but now That's why I went with the menswear.
Hmm.
Like, yeah, you're spending all this time to get a nice dress for yourself for a cocktail party, and you're trying to figure out, okay, your spouse or partner, hey, this same site offers high-end outfits for your spouse, partner, whoever, and you could just look and buy and pick out something for them also.
Yeah.
So that's why and same goes for the children.
Yeah.
The accessories part were actually, frankly, it felt to me to be so obvious that I thought if I just say that, then it's going to be like you're not thinking outside the box.
Yeah.
Selling dresses, sure, start selling
Right.
accessories with that.
Right.
So,
But so this is the trick, right? When
mm-hmm,
you're working on a case, is there is a
mm-hmm,
very delicate balance between what you're learning in the moment versus what you know,
mm-hmm,
right? Because
got it.
what you're describing is Nordstrom, right? I go to
Mm-hmm,
Nordstrom, I buy myself stuff, and then I go buy my kids a couple things, and then I might buy my husband something, right? That's a very
mm-hmm,
but then there is J Jill, right? And J Jill is strictly women's
mm-hmm,
wear. There and it's a very particular style and yeah, I know that because I'm a shopper. But when
mm-hmm.
I'm in the moment of the case, what I'm trying to do is get information from this case.
Okay,
Then I can bring in my outside knowledge, right? And then the final
got it.
thing, a little, this is sort of what you learn when you study strategy.
Mm-hmm,
The farther you get away from your core, the
mm-hmm.
riskier it is to execute.
Okay, sure.
So when you're trying to think about, and you probably do this in your business, it's just in a different, maybe it's different, a different way, but taking my existing set of customers and then selling them a new product is a whole lot easier than selling a new product to a new group of customers.
Mm-hmm.
So if 100% of my existing
Okay.
customers are women, and then I want to
Yep.
create a new customer segment that's men and a new line of clothing that is men's, that now adds a huge amount of risk. Now, it's not that I wouldn't do it, but
Yep.
I'm going to think a lot about that.
Got it.
Okay. So
Okay.
when you're,
Mm-hmm.
and this is just a framing matter, when you're thinking about growth, there's a risk reward trade off.
Yep.
And and then also, kind of at what stage of development is the company? I mean, this is $100 million company. Quite honestly, that's very tiny,
Yeah.
right?
That's
And
why
then
they're only catering to 50% of the
yeah,
demographic.
yeah, exactly. That's like they sell 5 dresses a
I
year.
mean, yeah,
You know,
basically, at the end of the day, we
yeah,
form perceptions, right? Like, okay, so they're selling to a very, I mean, I didn't even go too much into the age-based demographic, because clearly people who are buying
yeah,
dresses from
yeah,
are in a very, like, separate age group than,
yeah, yeah.
you
But
know,
that's why I think
so
a lot of
that's the,
times when you get a sense of what is the business and who are their customers and why, what is their reason for existing, it like that kind of upfront context or getting that context very quickly, it could be super
mm,
helpful because then the other things that you might think about, like the criteria for prioritizing, it
yeah,
starts to incorporate some
got it.
of that context.
Yeah. Yeah, if I may say, I think, to be honest, in the beginning, instead, like, a good question to ask would have been, like, they're looking for growth. Are they looking for just financial growth? Are they looking to acquire more customers? Or are they looking for their existing customers to spend more? So in this
Yeah.
case, it almost seems like they're looking for their existing customers to spend more,
Yes.
and that's how they want to grow, and not necessarily because the 16-year-old who wear Lululemon, they're probably not shopping on this website. So the strategy to get those would be completely different than the
Correct.
strategy
Correct.
to get. Yeah,
Correct.
I should have
But
asked that at the
here's the
beginning.
trick. The trick though, Chandrani, when you ask that question, you can't actually ask that question. You have to
Hmm.
propose those scenarios because a
Okay.
lot of times clients, all they know is they want to grow. And they're, I mean, I'm going to really sound awful, but a lot of times clients don't know what growth means for them.
Yeah. No, I understand.
So, right. So
You're
what you
not
can,
sounding
so
awful
instead of
at all.
asking the
Yep.
question, what you do is you say, I want to think about what you mean about growth. One way to grow
Mm.
is to have additional products that can be sold to your existing customer base. Another could
Yeah.
be growing the customer base. Another could be
Yeah.
tapping into a new segment. And so when we think about some of our criteria, those would be some of the ideas that I would incorporate, right? And you almost present it as a little bit of your hypotheses.
Mm-hmm.
And
Okay.
it's just sort of, and that, and then I think another technique, and this is a bit of a case technique, and if I said this the last time, I'm just going to reinforce it. Sometimes you propose those different scenarios, and then you say to the client,
Mm-hmm.
of those, is there anything that kind of aligns with your thinking?
Mm.
Right? As opposed to purely asking a question. In what way do you want to grow? The client will be like, I don't know, that's what I'm hiring you guys to do. But if you say, here's a couple of different ways, which one of them maybe fits with what, the organization
Got
is
it.
thinking, right? It just creates a slightly different dynamic.
Got it.
It's
So
almost
it's
like,
essentially
go ahead.
got it. Now, when you said like, so if you had like right pretty early on, when I told you here are some of the ideas, and then you said, so which four? I should have asked at that time, like, okay, we are thinking accessories, menswear, non-dress outfits for women and children's dresses. Are there any of these areas that you're thinking of as well? Something like that.
Yes, exactly. Exactly.
Got it.
And that's, I mean, as you kind of keep pushing this is how we are naturally in our jobs, right? I'm what we're trying to do is we're trying to bring what you do on a day-to-day basis into this interview setting in just a much, in this artificial setting.
Yeah.
Because that's how it is, right? Like you're talking about your, stuff with your colleagues or, the leaders that you work with, and you don't just ask them open-ended questions all the time. You propose some ideas. Here's some things I'm thinking about. What's your reaction to that, right?
Mm-hmm. Got it.
Um,
Good pointers.
so that's one area. The second, I think, your structure. Couple things just up at the start. Um, before you, and this isn't immediate, but like as you get through the next couple of weeks, before you start writing that structure down, like I actually want you to articulate some of your thinking. Like as I think about this case,
Okay.
some of the things that are coming top of mind. And you don't have to give a lot, but just give me something. And then you can say, let me
Okay.
organize a couple of my thoughts. And this is, how I might structure this. Okay.
Okay.
Um, from what you outlined for me for your structure, I think it might have been a little narrower than potentially would be ideal. One of the things to think about. So this is a really, not that I like checklists. I'm not a fan of checklists, but when you're thinking about the structure, think about the external things, and you had those, right? Trends, consumer interest. You want to think a little bit about how this company sits competitively. And then you want to think about how this company operates. Because in anybody who sells stuff, and I didn't, this didn't come up and I didn't really tell you, this company could be a merchandiser or they could be a manufacturer retailer, right? And you have to know that because in any company, they may or may not make their own stuff. And so you need to have part of your structure that looks at the operational footprint. Because how they would expand, how they would add to their product line, it
Mm-hmm.
matters how they operate. If they're purely a merchandiser, it's actually really easy to add a new product line. It's really the merchandising process kicks in. If they're a manufacturer, then there's some extra layers in that decision
Mm-hmm.
making, right? And then you take it forward, how would they market this stuff? How would they integrate it into the catalog? How would they model this stuff? These are some of those like potential insights and nuances. Like how would you show that the dress with the accessories? How would you do that? Would they partner with, if they're going to do whatever, would they partner with somebody? How would they brand it? There's a million questions you can go into here, but they start going through the different functional areas of the business, right? So you think about the supply chain, you think about operations, you think about marketing, you think about the financial piece, you think about human capital, and if you can kind of just check off those functional boxes in your structure and think about what's relevant, then it gives you that MECE, it gives you the CE part of MECE.
Okay.
Okay. And then when you get into the evaluation criteria, it makes it a little bit cleaner. And that was really I think my note about when you were talking about the evaluation criteria. You can present that a little bit cleaner. Like you were talking about, well, growth, and we need to analyze growth, and we need to do that. What I really want to know is, okay, there's 5 things I would evaluate. 1, I would evaluate growth. We would want which segment is growing the fastest, which segment is the largest, and which one that we could potentially tap into given our positioning. Secondly, I'd want to look at overall profitability. Thirdly, I want to evaluate its ability to integrate into our half catalog, half e-commerce model. Fourth category, I'd want to evaluate how we would produce. And then the fifth category, I'd want to evaluate strategic alignment with our brand or something. I don't know. So I would want to, regardless of the potential addition to the portfolio, I'd want to evaluate those 5 categories.
Okay.
Okay, so you're sort of just like sharpening how you talk about them and why each one would be important. Right.
Okay.
So
A couple of go ahead.
okay, just let me say, yeah. So one of the things that happens when you get a question like this is you tend to take one area. This is not just you, but a lot of people preparing for cases. It's like you get into sort of one of the criteria and you kind of talk about it deeply. And then you only ever talk about one thing. So what you want to do is you sort of want to lay out, think about it this way. If I was going to hire somebody, what are the 5 characteristics that I need for the person on my team? I need these 5 characteristics. Okay, now why are each of those characteristics important and how would I assess them? That's sort of the second part of the answer.
Mm-hmm.
And this is a bit of this is just again a consulting technique of, Bain calls it answer first. It's the inductive versus deductive, like give the rubric, give the criteria, and then kind of explain each one. And then within explaining each one, how you would evaluate it. As opposed to like talking about everything for number 1 and then everything for number 2 and then so on and so forth.
Okay.
Does that make sense?
Some of it does. I think, okay, I guess more of, as I said, so far my knowledge of how to do cases has been based off material I've read, either on, Case in Point or other books or, consulting club material, that kind of stuff. Is it, like, it almost sounds like how what you're telling, it's more important to actually talk through things than it is to actually write things down in like an answer sheet version.
Well, in the live interview, you might be writing.
Mm-hmm.
Depends on sort of how that interview is flowing. When you're talking to partners, you might not be doing as much writing, right? You might be, if you're sitting across the table from each other, you might just be talking.
Okay. Because I'm getting stressed out thinking about, I should be writing down a structure and have it out there as soon as possible. And sadly, I'm not able to fully break out of it. Like, okay, I asked a couple of questions today, and I think that's what, if I consolidate most of the feedback you've given me, seems like I need to be asking more questions and thinking about it as opposed to focusing on writing things down. But I'm doing that. I know I'm very focused on outlining everything.
Yeah, so one thing just to remember, right? All those books that you're reading are written for the full-time MBA who's interviewing on campus for an associate position. And so
very good point.
they are writing down stuff, and they're writing down the structure, they're taking notes along the way, they're doing the math on paper, and they're making all that very transparent, very visible to their interviewer. Okay. In a second round, it's not as, I use the term formalized. When and part of it, Chandra, like when I sit in meetings with people, I draw structures. When someone presents a topic, I draw structures. But I'm using it to sort of organize my thinking. When I talk to people, I'm talking. I'm looking them in the eye and I'm talking. So we, in the real world, we go back and forth between our notes and our discussion. In your interviews where you're going to interview with partners, my bet is going to be that it is more of a discussion.
Yeah, the first one, the one that I already had with a senior partner, and the other 2 I'll talk to, this guy actually outranks them. So we'll see. But as I said, that the case was more like, okay, we have to do a case. Let's do a case on whiteboard. I'm like, oh God.
Yeah. 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 And, normally, right? Like I'm a professor too. I write on the whiteboard while I'm talking to my students, right? You're writing and you're talking. It's sort of this, it's just like, with you, I'm writing while I'm talking to you, I'm writing down notes, I'm listening to you, I'm writing down notes. So
Got it.
for your practice purposes, there's the technical part of doing the case where you're writing
Mm-hmm.
things down. There's the thinking part of the case where you're engaging your
Yeah.
brain to think about the problem solving. And then there's the
Mm-hmm.
speaking part of the case where you're discussing what you're thinking.
Yep.
You know, the and the speaking part, you might be speaking off the top of your head or you might be speaking from some of the notes you've jotted down.
Mm-hmm.
You have to be a little bit adaptable, again, particularly given the interview setting that you're in. Right.
Okay.
So one of the things that you can practice, and this is maybe,
Mm-hmm.
something to build into your homework activities, practice writing and talking simultaneously.
Mm-hmm. Okay.
And so when it's like if you said to me, I need to go buy a new car. What do you think are the most important criteria for buying a new car? And I would say, well, I don't know what you're looking for, but if it was me, I'd think about these criteria and I would take out my piece of paper and I would say, okay, great. I think one of the most important criteria for the car is the price. But that would also consider how many years of ownership. The next
Got it.
criteria would be miles per gallon. How much gas mileage does it get? Third could be the space of the vehicle. Fourth could be the cost of maintenance. And
Mm-hmm.
fifth is the image you want to have while driving the car. Now,
Yep.
while I was speaking to you, I just wrote down 5 things on the back of a piece of paper,
Mm-hmm.
right? And then
Mm-hmm.
I would say, look, if I was going to evaluate price, here's how I would think about it. If I'm going to evaluate miles
Okay.
per gallon, right, here's how I think about it. And then I would go into it in more in depth. But listing out those 5 things, ideally, if you and I were sitting face to face, I would be looking you in the eye, telling you, and in split seconds, I'd go down to my paper and I'd write what I'm speaking. And that's
Perfect.
one of those, like, I mean, granted, I was a consultant for a really long time, and you learn that skill because that's how you would interact with a client as you're
Got
framing
it.
stuff. Okay. So if you can,
Mm-hmm.
whenever you're speaking about considerations, brainstorms, lists, criterias, factors, drivers, right? All these things that ultimately have a list, I think you can write and speak simultaneously. That's a high
Okay.
bar, but I would, and then you
Yeah.
can practice it, right? Um, okay, so let me
Okay.
summarize a couple things. Um, I think, like I said, I think you got the bare bones of this. I think it's just getting like there's a few little technique things, and then it's pushing yourself to kind of get this, like just these slightly more clever insights. And there's any
Okay.
million, in this case, there's any one of hundreds of directions that you could go in. But it's
Mm-hmm.
like, well,
Yeah.
is
Yeah.
this going to be really hard to manufacture? How are, gosh, accessories, do you partner with somebody? It's kind of these non these sort of level 2, level 3 things. Like that's where I think you want to work towards. And I think you can get there because you're speaking through the fundamentals pretty effectively. So now you want to push yourself beyond
Okay.
the fundamentals.
Yep, I get it.
Okay.
Okay,
Um,
very good.
yeah, I wouldn't. I mean, I don't think there's anything like dramatic. I think there's progress. I guess the one dramatic thing I would tell you is stop being so tight. Stop reading the books. Stop.
I stopped reading the books. I
Yeah.
stopped. I'm only following rocket blocks. But it's
Just
hard. It's
yes.
hard. It's hard. It's, I mean,
Yes. It's
tight
like
is what we
freedom.
do with 10 years of training. No freedom. It's,
Be
come on. It's hard. This
be
is
I'm gonna
how I
write
run
this on
my
your
life.
notes. Be freer. Is freer? I don't know even know how to spell that.
I'll,
Freer. More free
yeah, yeah, that's going to be
in your approach so
very,
that it
very
doesn't
hard.
feel so orchestrated. I want you to I want you to just talk to me like you're wearing a dress, you're staring at the Divine Dress catalog, you're like in the business.
Yep. Oh, that's hard.
Well, yes, of
But
course it's hard, but you know, I'm
no,
sure
no, no. It's
that you
hard.
can do that.
It's harder to do the easier thing. If
It
you are
is.
training somebody to become tight, it's probably harder. But just because it requires
Yeah.
different, right? It's a different way of thinking. And someone with, I mean, I've been just very, very technical, specialized in engineering field for a very long time. If you look at a case, it's very difficult to think. That's the way I was telling you last time that it's very hard to think breadth when every training is think depth. So,
Yeah.
but
So
you know,
here's the
I
place
get it.
where your training, Chandrani, is going to come into play. Your grasp of facts, right? Your depth in areas when so I do this a lot when I'm I guess in positions where I have to persuade and influence. Like I can pick out the 3 or 4 most important facts and present them with authority,
Mm-hmm.
like Zeus with a lightning rod. Boom, right? And people are moved by that, you know.
Mm-hmm.
And so when you have this freedom to it's like, you know, I go back to my sports analogies, like Olympic figure skating. You know, there was a Japanese
Mm-hmm.
man this year that won the gold medal, and his freedom and flow and movement was incredible, but his technical
Mm-hmm.
precision was unbelievable.
Mm-hmm.
Like he just looked like he was floating, but yet, boom, you know, all of the little tiny things he did incredibly well. And I think that that's one of the arts of consulting is you have this freedom of movement, but yet when it comes to, you know, facts and analysis and understanding and, you know, getting those technical areas, which is where you're being brought in to understand, like when you can operate in those two worlds, that is something special.
Mm-hmm.
And that's why consulting firms want people like you because they need that tech. Somebody like me with an MBA, I can't be trained to do what you do.
Yeah,
You just need to
I
demonstrate to
could train you.
them. Well, the question is, do I desire that training? That's a whole nother matter, right?
You probably don't.
But the side that I sit on, you can definitely,
Mm.
if you can show hints of being able to do that, you are a rare. a rare person. So keep that in the back of your mind. Your technical expertise
Yeah,
is going to
got
come
it.
into play, but the freedom, the flow of movement, that's the place where you just got to show hints of that.
Got it. Got it. And got it. I will request you to send me your notes and the video again, I mean, the recording. So
Indeed.
now, because what I'm going to do is I'll think about what you said, and then when I listen to it, I'll be able to correlate the two better, your feedback with what I said.
Perfect.
So that will really help me.
Perfect. I will send you the stuff tonight, and then we can figure out when you want to do your next practice.
So I was actually hoping, since I'd mentioned I'm going to go to Asia on 18th, and I think this was our second, right? And we have three
Yep.
more?
Yep.
Okay. So would it be possible if we tentatively try to plan the next session on the 7th or 8th, whichever works better for you, and then the following 14th or 15th, whichever works better, and then I save one to have a talk with you when I return on, like, I'll return on 24th, the interviews on 27th, either 25th or 26th, something like
Yep.
that.
That's great.
I mean, we could definitely talk when I'm in Thailand, but probably not as
Oh, yeah, it's a little harder.
discussed.
So I could do the 8th is a little tricky for me because I have a workshop that day until like 2
Okay,
o'clock my time. So I could do it after, but the 7th,
that's fine.
the morning is probably a little better for me.
Yeah, morning's better for me too. 7th morning would be great.
Okay, what time your time on Saturday the 7th would be reasonable?
I mean, like, 8 a.m., 9 a.m.,
Okay.
like, because I realize you're 2 hours ahead of me.
Okay. We'll do it like 8 Pacific time. I'll
Yeah,
send out a
that
confirmation.
works.
And okay, Chandrani, that works perfect. And
And
I'll send you some
maybe,
stuff tonight
yeah,
you can peek
thank
at.
you.
And good. All right. Well, enjoy the rest of your day. Good luck with everything, and we'll talk
Thank
on
you. You
Saturday.
too.
Okay. Take care.
Sounds good. Appreciate your time. Bye.
You're welcome. Bye bye.